Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, our lead solutions engineer. Also joining us today is Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department, and collectively we are here to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will tackle them over the next hour. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Excellent. Let me go ahead and make you presenter.
Ah, cool, thank you.
Look at.
Excellent,
There we are.
excellent, Dave. Good to be back. Good to be back. Hey, this is a live report. This is live right now. If you're watching via the web YouTube channel later on, it's not going to be live, but if you're here, and I just want to do a quick man in the street update. I'm looking out my office window, and there seem to be a lot of people dancing in the street. They're only adults, no children, and they seem to be having a party and enjoying themselves. So I'm not sure what's going on. I don't think we won a major national championship. Oh, no. You know what today is?
Does it have something to do with school, maybe?
Yes, the first day of school, and the parents are celebrating.
I know.
I don't see any
sitting out in their
there,
driveways, toasting with champagne, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yes, the school bus drives off.
There seems to be a run on mimosas in the Austin area. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Well, that'll be me on Thursday, man. My kids.
Very true. Hey, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And Dave, it's always good to talk to you. Summer's almost over. Well, it is technically over for my kids, for sure. We only have another week left. And the most exciting news, other than some really great news I'm going to share in a few minutes, is college football starts weekend after next. So that's going to be huge, huge, and very, very exciting. Overall, football, fall is always a great time of the year because of that. So now it's time to shift gears, and then you have Halloween and all the other fun stuff. With that said, I will be sharing some really exciting news about the product. But before we go into that, I want to do a little bit of follow-up. So today, I don't have much of a big demo, but I want to follow up on a couple questions that came out of my presentation last week in terms of ViewBox items. Talk a little bit more about that. Then I'll get into the exciting news, and then we will get to your questions and, well, hopefully answers. We'll definitely get to the question part. The answer part is always kind of a catch can. So take the time to go to your GoToWebinar control panel and go to the questions section and put that in there. And Dave and our esteemed colleague, Sarah, will be monitoring that. And as usual, Sarah will probably answer them before I do. So just keep an eye on there. You don't have to wait for me. But we will get through as many of those as possible. With that said, what I'd like to do is first and foremost, go back and talk a little bit about the ViewBox Control. Last week, we talked about the ViewBox Control. And a lot of what we've been discussing is the fact that the ViewBox Control is insanely flexible, meaning you basically take a data source, whether that be static JSON, a list, a database, a web API, etc., and then you merge it into a presentation using HTML, CSS, and whatever you want to do, and you can create great presentations of your data and information, and you're not limited by the default controls and what they look like, etc. The sky's the limit, and we've demonstrated that a couple times on how you do it. And last week we spent a little more time saying that not only can you display information, but you can interact with that data using something called the item concept. So I'm going to run back in there and talk about that. There were a couple follow-up questions we got after there. Do a little quick recap, and then I'll come back to share some of the really exciting news. So I'm going to go into my development environment here, and I'm going to bring up the demonstration we had last week, which was basically a ViewBox control that would show some information. We showed initially how I could use my very crude HTML functionality to show that. And then we also showed how you can use some of our now new built-in templates to create extremely nice looking interfaces. And very important, these interfaces can be interactive. So you'll notice as I click on a part of the interface, you'll see that a little alert comes up and says something's going on there. And I can make different parts of it. So for instance, I was showing how in this case, I'm clicking on different elements here, but here I can actually attach what is called an item to a button, and that button will trigger that item, or the essentially the HTML that's around this button. So it's very flexible in terms of you get the new methodology to present a wonderful user experience that looks a lot better than what I'm capable of. We have the built-in templates, and we'll have more templates coming as we continue to mature. And you can also use outside CSS HTML resources. You can find them on Fiverr, Upwork, places like that, who can design these own things. And they really just have to deliver essentially a sort of a template with sample data into it, and then you can make that live using the ViewBox. And so we're very excited about the further embrace of the ViewBox because it should transform a lot of how people use the alpha system. It becomes much more flexible. You have better looking interfaces, you have more unique, and you have experiences that you can generate for your users that are phenomenal. Now, how this is working when I click on an item in my interface is through something called an item. So I'm going to go into my items here, or into my ViewBox, and you'll see we have created a couple items here. And all items are think of them as pointers to, that can be attached to the HTML. So you want to attach to an HTML, and then when you do that, then you can trap a action from the user on that piece of HTML and trigger a item. So that allows you to link the layout, which is just HTML, with there. And you'll see, here's an example. I'm going to go back and show it just so we can see how it works. You'll notice that in my crude example, I'm clicking on here and I'll click first name, and you'll see it throws up this alert. And you'll notice also it has the word John in there because I am passing in something called an argument, which is what I want to follow on here. So if I go in here and go to the layout, you'll see what I did as it opens up. Did I click it right? There we go. We have a span around my first name here. So my first name with a combination of some static text and then that field. You could use divs. There's many different things you can do to kind of attach it, but I'm attaching an item. And in this case, I'm attaching the item name here, but I'm also attaching it what's called an argument. And that's the key thing I want to talk about. Is I'm going to go here and I'm going to open up this click event, and you'll see that in the text, you will have two different options. Option one is something called an item and argument. Option two is the value of the A5 value attribute. And so what happens is when you create an item here, or you create an item, then when you put it into it, you actually, this is the item name here, and then after the colon, you'll notice that I'm adding an argument here called first name. And that argument is what is dynamically populated and passed to it. So the question that came was, well, okay, interesting, Dion, is that when you actually, let me go right here, sorry, jumping around a little bit, but if I wanted to replace this, let's go ahead and delete this and put this in again. If I go ahead and say insert item, you'll notice that I select the item and then I have two selections, item arguments and an A5 value. The question is, well, what's the difference between the two? And the answer is a whole lot of nothing. And I did some discussions with development. There were some original ideas about how to use these, but they're essentially the same thing. In terms of when I insert an item argument, I can put one of my fields in there and it passes it an argument. Same thing with an A5 value. I can put in an A5 value and it will pass there. The difference in terms of how it looks, and let me go ahead and put in, let's say, first name, is, so I'm putting in curly brackets, the name of that. You'll see that it says A5 value equals, and then in quotes, the actual field or fields. I can put more than one field. I'm not limited to one field there. Then when I'm actually in the item here, if I want to get the value of the A5, I just put in a V right here. So as we saw last week, it's essentially the same thing with an item argument. It just, you'll see instead of a A5 value, it just has a colon and an argu1. And the history is we started with A5 value, and then we decided, oh, we're going to make it a little more readable, less structured, and it makes more sense to call them arguments. But the bottom line is they're essentially the same in terms of how they operate. Is basically when you insert an item, which is a trigger, think of it as a trigger, you can, when you insert that item, you can then add either an A5 value, or you can put in, oh, I don't have it in this one. You can put an A5 value, or you can just put a argument by putting this in and then saying, if I'm passing an argument, it's going to be something like this. So you'll get used to it. So you can use either method. It's really up to you. It's going to achieve the same thing, is that when the item is called, it's going to pass this little data value and go from there. The other question I had as well, that's great, but actually that's incorrect. That should be a colon. Well, I actually need to pass in a couple things. Well, when I put this together and I put in this A5 value, I'm not limited to just one of the fields. So I could put in here, last name. Let's do it exactly right. And what will happen is that the A5 value that's passed in will include all those elements. So if you need to pass more than one quote unquote value or argument, you can insert multiple of those items in it. And what will happen is that when it gets into your item, it's going to be in this V, and then you can extract the elements out of it, maybe through like a delimiter of a pipe delimiter or something else from there. And you'll see right down here, your JavaScript can reference these values, the V, which is the dedicated A5 value attribute. And then item argument is just the item name colon and then the argument after it. So you can, and there's some sample code here.
Right.
Oh,
there.
sure, please.
Yeah, so someone did said, how does it look with multiple arguments? And I see how you pass those in. It looks like
let me go ahead and show you that real quick.
Yeah.
So in this case, I'm passing in the A5 value first name and last name. Then I'm going to go into my items here, and you'll see I'm grabbing that V. Since we're now using an A5 value versus an item argument, it's going to be in the V variable. So if I haven't screwed it up, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Good question. I appreciate that. And I'll click the first name and, oh, John. Let's go back. Did I save that? Let's go into the layout. I didn't save it. Some reason it didn't.
Okay.
Save often.
Yes.
So notice it's putting in the first argument, the second. Now what I can do is I can go to take the next step here, and I'm going to go ahead and put in a pipe character. And I can do
it. So it doesn't put a delimiter in for you,
right?
But you get to choose which one you want.
Yeah, and so you can structure it however you want to. You'll notice now it has John Smith. And so what you can then do is in your click event here, I can say my var is equal to V, and then I can then write my extraction code here to grab the individual items. So for instance, I could say, okay, give me, parse it based on a pipe character, and then give, and then argument 1, argument 2. And there's a ton of JavaScript parsing technology built into JavaScript that make that very simple. I just don't have an example today. But you can basically say, what it will do is it will take a string with delimiters and turn it into like a set of objects. And you can say, okay, give me object 1, which I know is the first name. Object 2 is the last name. And then once I have that data, I can then perform whatever I want, including, and this is very important, I can go in and create any kind of alpha, action JavaScript and pass it that information. So it becomes really powerful in terms of your ability to integrate more complex sort of behaviors into a item, because all of the JavaScript actions are available. So in case right here, I can say give an alert, but I can also insert the code to run the JavaScript action there. So really think of, again, items are a trigger or a link between a HTML element. And let me just reiterate, that's very important, is that you'll notice that in my HTML here, I have first name. I surrounded it with what's called a span. And what a span is just sort of a hidden sort of it's like a container that doesn't put out a carriage return after it. If I put a div in there, then it would put out a carriage return. So there's little behavioral changes. And the reason I did a span is I wanted them all to show up on there. But your case, you may already have divs surrounding your items there. So the important thing is you need to insert your item and any arguments in that sort of surrounding tag so that you'll notice. So for instance, let's go over here. Let's look at this. Let's say we have something called last name. Well, I could actually technically insert it here because you have an opening B tag and a /B tag here. And then everything within these two tags, it would then trigger that. So you can kind of use the existing ones in there. But it's often a good practice to either put a div or a span around it so you're kind of grouping things into a an element there. You don't need like an ID. You could put an ID in here if you wanted to, but you don't need to. All it's really doing is saying anything between the span begin and the span end, if I click on anything in this area, then it's going to trigger this alert and it's going to pass the current row's first name and last name. So you'll notice in my data source here, I actually have multiple rows of data. And when you present it on the screen, you see each of these is laid out on an individual item. So what the system does is when it renders, and all that's going on behind the scenes, is when it renders this HTML, it just iterates through this one for each record. So if you look at the HTML, you see behind it. And then what it does is it sees this A5 item and this value, and then sort of inserts that into the HTML. So it's rendered, all of that data is ready to go. And so it's pretty cool technology because it's insanely flexible, meaning you can attach items to anything. And you'll see some examples. I, in this case, went ahead and say, you know what? In my HTML, and this is that second template on the right. Let me open this up, takes a moment. There we go. If I go to my layout, you'll see I have a button here. I had two buttons, one on the left and the right. And so I said, oh, I'm just going to insert this little button action right here in the button tag. So you'll notice it says button, my tab, my item, and then a close little caret, and then the ending. So it says anything between there. And it just so happens because this is a button HTML, it renders as a button that really looks very nicely. And that's dictated by your CSS over here. You can see they have these different CSS that shows like the background, how they're structured, etc. So again, you can associate these items with any element inside of it. So for instance, this one is in the header, and then I had a second one in my button. And so you just have to find where those areas are and you're good to go. And you can also, if you go, oh, it doesn't exist, I want to put in my own, you can always go like, for instance, you know, put in like here, span, and then a /span, and then you can kind of create your own little header there, or not header, but container. And then also you can put in divs also, but divs will put in a carriage return or line feed, so it does change the look and feel of it. I could even see, notice this P right here, I could even put it inside this paragraph so that anything inside of this paragraph will trigger from there. So again, quick summary, items are basically links to a action that then can trigger JavaScript or action JavaScript. You insert those into your HTML. So therefore, when the user interacts in any way with that HTML, it will trigger this item. And then very important is that if you have arguments or A5 values, you can associate that with it. So when this item occurs, then you have either in the V variable or item arguments, you have that data passed in. So you can kind of identify if there's 5 things on the screen, which one did they actually click on, which is usually going to be probably a primary key of the record or something like that, because you can infer everything else from that data there. But it opens up. We've built several controls based on this. And so really underneath Alpha is the ViewBox is starting to drive a lot of control development because we can make very innovative and creative controls that include both display, but also interactivity between it. So that's my quick recap. I hope, well, it's a little longer than I thought, but wanted to make sure we were kind of clear about items and arguments and A5 values and how you can use them. And you'll find they're really flexible because before, maybe let's say I have 5 things, I put in a bunch of labels and then mock them there. Now I can literally put in a view box, give it some JSON, and then it will represent it. So you're going to get like, if you don't really need to have like an edit text box, you're not going to have to need to do that. And on my next announcement, we'll talk a little bit more about some really cool capabilities that have just been released we'll talk about. So any other kind of questions about view boxes or items, those, that would be, I'm available.
Excellent. So yes, So this person is interested in using a view box as a menu, which I think is kind of interesting. But
Very cool.
what they want to know is there some way when they put the mouse over one of those items, you could get it to highlight?
Ah, gotcha. Okay. So at this time, I'm not sure because I have like the on-click events
Yeah.
before select. So there seems to be kind of an interaction with the control.
Could it be
If
done
you're
with
doing that, you
CSS
really
though?
should just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you do it with CSS? Is there like an on hover event or something, or an on hover
Yeah. Again,
property?
you can put anything in here, and in
Yeah.
here, so one thing you may want to do is, yeah, you could use just an off-the-shelf CSS technology or technique to achieve that hover effect. And so that would be a combination of CSS, maybe some JavaScript that does the swap, and then the layout there. And again, a ViewBox consists of the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. And often menus are those three elements. You just copy and paste them into here. And then when that renders, it will include all of this into the web
Oh, I
page
see.
that's
Yeah,
being
sure. Use a
displayed.
pre-built one and just load it into the view box. I got you.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That's kind of there. But definitely, if you're doing any kind of menu, I would definitely encourage you to go look at the expanding menu. You may have other requirements or want it to look a little differently, but the
Hmm.
expanding menu already has, can I do this? Excuse me. Did I hit the wrong one? No, I hit the wrong one, I think. Okay. Expanding menu. I have a pre-release. Oh, this is a pre-release, so I'm having a problem with that one. But the expanding menu would allow you to do much more. It has all this capability. And it's already kind of pre-made for menuing. You do have the ability to style it any way you want. It does have certain default behaviors, but it's a modern menu interface. So I think you'd see some pretty success for it with. But absolutely, if you want to create your own, then, for instance, you can go in here and you go HTML. You'll see in some of these templates and other stuff, this will show you an example. So you have this menu here. And so I like going into these because then you can kind of see it. And I don't know what's going on there. So maybe I picked the wrong example. Have to look for the right ones. Go back. I haven't heard the main tag. So you'll see I have menus up here. If I want to replicate that, then what I would do is, here's the HTML here. You'll notice here is the style. So this is your CSS stuff you would bring in. And so you could either attach it as a style sheet to the overall UX, or better yet, just grab this here and stick it into the style piece here. Then you'll notice here is your HTML, and this is your HTML structure. You have a nav bar right here. And I think there's some JavaScript. So I wonder if there's any JavaScript that goes to it. Oh, maybe it's just plain vanilla CSS in this case. So you'll see it's kind of highlighting it there. And it stays there. So as you can see, you could build this little menu here using a view box, using a combination of the style information and using this HTML to create this. And then it just basically all Alpha is doing is building the web page with that information from there. So that's how you would approach it. Now, the thing that's missing here is you'll notice it's just got these three buttons. Again, what's kind of cool there is you go, okay, great. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to insert my item and I'm going to insert my variable so that then I could trigger some action JavaScript or something like that. So you could reuse that same concept here. If you wanted like a hover effect, then that's probably going to be like, notice this has got some hover effect, but it's not being activated. I'm not sure why. But you would, that would be a CSS HTML trick. But what I was going to say is sometimes you'll see some of these menus requires a little piece of JavaScript. Well, you'll see that script either in here or shown, and you just got to make sure that you bring that JavaScript into, oh, I busted this badly. So I broke it. View box. There we go. Let me reopen it real quick. And you would just need to make sure that you bring that HTML here, your CSS, and then any of that JavaScript here. And then basically we just take all that, throw it into the web page along with our own little special sauce, and you're good to go. So good question. Thank you.
Great. And very related question is, how would you indicate to the user that the span is clickable? Because you notice the mouse pointer shape doesn't change when you're there.
Good point. So one, you could, for instance, put like an underline under this text right here that shows that that is clickable. That's kind of the universal way you want to do it. As far as showing a mouse.
Since you can put those tags in a span or a div or a p, what if we put them in an anchor tag, but had href just go to the current location?
Ah, interesting. Well, I think that would maybe work the same. Let's go ahead and let's play and break something. So let's go ahead and put an anchor in here on state. Now, notice I'm going to have to put state inside the anchor. And then I'll go href is equal to star, so it doesn't do anything. And now what I'm going to do is in my A tag here, I'm going to insert an item, and I'll insert my alert text. So I've got a href nowhere there. And let's see. Great idea. Again, we're just kind of using. Yep, there you go. Check it out.
There you go. So just
notice I haven't notice why it's giving me this weird message right here is because I haven't given it an argument. So it's trying to display. So
I see what you mean.
Yeah, but you're right. Isn't that cool? Actually, that was a really nice idea. Whoever threw that out. So because you can just you get the little handover, you know it's linkable versus just something static.
It's independent discovery. Me and Robert here.
Cool. Thank you, Robert.
Wonderful. Well done.
Yeah, so as you can see, when there's a will, there's a way. You can leverage a combination of alpha, but also built in. And I like that href because when you click on it, it doesn't actually do anything. It's like an anchor tag.
But it styles it the way you expect, It changes the mouse.
Yeah, so you don't have to play with that.
Yeah.
Cool. Great one.
Nice. So let's see what else I've got here. This person is interested in how to get a value from a parent grid if the child grid is linked via row expander.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, so you have a parent-child relationship. It's a row expander, and you want to get the parent from it. There's what? Let me let's see. Yeah, we'll do the announcement after we do that. There are methods in alpha that allow you to get the information about your parent. So let me hold on 1 second here. Let's say alpha. And I think I saw some before. Okay. So I'm looking on the alpha forum and so let me go ahead and grab this and I will put it in the chat window, one of our esteemed colleagues. And again, I want to, the alpha message board has a lot of great content, talks about that, including examples of how to go from there. So you'll notice that there is a command built into alpha. It's a JavaScript command that says grid object get parent object. So this basically gets a pointer to the parent object. And then this if statement right here is saying, well, if there is a parent object, if it exists, then you can get the value of, for instance, the selected row information using here. So this is a good example. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and copy that and put it in there. So it goes there. But that's probably how you would approach it. You'd give that a check. And I think it looks like even there's a demonstration that someone put up. Sometimes these go away after time. Anyway, so they're doing like a show hide function or something like that. If you're just trying to get the value, you get the pointer to the grid object parent, and then from there you can say get the value of the selected row, and it can give you a row for there. So nice thing is that if you've already set up the linking, then if you create like a new record on a child grid, it's going to automatically insert the values from the parent record. But sometimes you need to do something a little more fancy, so you have to kind of do your own little code there. But this is done through JavaScript, and again, through this special built-in function that says grid object get parent object. And since it's either a link grid or an expanding grid, it says, oh, I have a parent, here's the pointer to that parent. Go ahead and run any command you want on that pointer. So in my case, you'll see here it's getting the selected row and getting the value from the parent object, but it could also be telling the parent object to do something based on clicking a button on something below. So the sky's the limit. So check that out. That might solve what you're looking for.
Excellent. Next question is a database question, and the question is, can Alpha use natural keys, or can it only use sort of the surrogate keys, ones that have been generated? And I have the answer to that, which is it depends on your database. So
yeah.
When you look back at old DVFs, actually, even then we were supporting natural keys, and you could have multiple nodes. For example, if you wanted, instead of having an ID for each record, you could go by, say, last name and date of birth and phone number as a collection of those three things, and to see if that works. And that's gonna vary from database to database, but Alpha will certainly support it if your database supports
True.
it.
Very, very true.
Another question we had, which is, how do you set up an S3 bucket permissions to permit an Alpha web app to open and view files? And as it turns out, I actually wrote a document on that exact
Excellent. Yeah.
subject.
No, I was just playing that
like
with
this was
week.
a setup question. I know, really. And
yeah.
So let me just go ahead and.
It was asked by Dave M. has asked this question.
From Austin, Massachusetts. Yeah. All right,
yeah, exactly.
So let me go ahead and share my screen. We'll see what we can do here. All right, so
I got to show something else about S3, which is so cool.
Is it
so
really?
while you do that,
Awesome.
I will get
right,
ready on my side. Go ahead.
All right, excellent. So this is the document. This is actually transform documentation, because Alpha Transform also can use S3 buckets, but it's the same regardless of whether you're using Transform or you're using Alpha Anywhere. So let me just paste. First of all, I'm just going to paste this into the chat. I want you to know this is the Transform User's Guide, and in particular, you want to jump to page 153. And we sort of walk you through setting up a S3 storage bucket. Now, if you're not familiar with an S3 storage bucket, think of it as like a cloud-based file hosting service from Amazon. There are a bunch of great reasons to use it, but one of which is that you don't slow down your Alpha server when you're doing sort of boring, mundane things like moving large files from one place to another. So when I say large files, think about videos, maybe even photos as well. It is common, for example, to design your mobile applications so that when you take a picture, instead of having that picture have to get sent to the Alpha server and then recorded onto a hard drive, it can go right to Amazon S3. S3 will give you back a little token pointing to that image, and you can store that token in the database. But the question was, how do I set it up? What permissions do I need to do? And it's actually really simple. The only thing you really need to keep in mind, and you can in fact use all of the defaults. So here's just a picture of the Amazon AWS console where we're setting up our S3 bucket. Once you have it set up, you use all the default settings, but you need to make sure that public blocking for the bucket is turned off. Public blocking means that nobody except someone else on AWS cloud is allowed to get to your stuff, but that's not how you want it set up, because you're going to have Alpha perhaps set up someplace that isn't on an AWS cloud. So shut off public blocking. You're still secure because it still takes an access key and a secret access key to get in. It just will permit you to go through there. So that's sort of the key right there. So if you want to see how that's set up, you can download that link and take a look at pages 153 and 154. And then we go into, and actually on page 155, I talk a little bit about setting up storage connection strings. So just like you can have a database connection string that might connect to MySQL or SQL Server or something like that, Alpha also has the idea of a storage connection string, which is a connection string that has got all of your credentials built into it that you can use to connect to Amazon S3 or Microsoft Azure. And there are some action JavaScript and action scripting commands that allow you to work with those once you have that connection string. So that's the answer to that. But if you have more questions, and if you have more questions on anything, by the way, I always forget to point this out, but just send an email to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com, and we'll be happy to take a look for you. All right, Dion, over to you. What S3 news do you have?
Yeah, no. And then I've got some cool news right after that, but I want to kind of
Oh my
share a
gosh,
little
nothing
bit
but
more
coolness today. I love it. All right, here.
now.
I have made
Okay.
you a presenter. There you are.
Just to expand, since you asked about S3, we're going to tell you about S3, whether you like it or not. So sit
More than
still,
ever
sit down.
now.
It's
Yeah.
school's in, so sit down, shut up, and watch what I'm going to demonstrate right now. I'm kind of old school about that. Otherwise, the nuns are going to come around and wrap your knuckles.
Oh
So
boy.
get with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so very important. S3 has the concept of a bucket, and buckets are like says it's a bucket. It's a set of, and they call them objects. They don't call them files or anything. It's just objects, things that are thrown into that bucket. And you can have as many buckets as you want. Now, the interesting thing about that, let's see, okay, yeah, buckets are by nature single level. So everything in a bucket is just in a bucket. The interesting aspect about it, though, is that you can use a concept called folders. And I have a recent project where someone wanted to say, well, I want to use an S3 bucket. I don't want to create a bucket for every one of my customers, but I want to place information for each customer into a folder concept. So this is showing you here that you can use the concept of folders. This is the AWS console, and I'm in the Amazon S3. And you'll notice here's my bucket. Here's my folder. If I click in there, then it's showing me the items in that there. I can go back up one there, and from that standpoint. Now, the reality is underneath these are all at the same level in a bucket. They're all at the root level, but they have a different naming structure. And let me talk about how you use that, which is really cool. It's a common use case. I'm going to jump over into here something called Cloudberry Explorer for Amazon S3. It's they have a free version. I highly recommend if you're going to do anything with S3, first step you should do is go download Cloudberry Explorer for Amazon S3 because it gives you, you can use the console. And in fact, a lot of things you need to do are in the console. But once you have the buckets up, if you want to just go in and take something and copy and paste it, and it's like a file browser, it's there. And then I can have my different connections and be able to do stuff here, go into my different buckets and see what they are. Notice I have my folder interface here. But I'm going to
That's
go ahead and
very
go into
cool. Just
folder
like
one.
Windows Explorer, basically, right? With the
Exactly, yeah. And they have like a whole bunch of other, like they have a paid version that has a whole bunch of other stuff, and for instance, the one thing that also S3 does, which we haven't talked about, is when you set up a bucket, you can set up automatic versioning, meaning that if a new version of this file is uploaded, it will automatically create an archive copy for you behind the scenes without you having to do anything. So it's just, there's some really cool things that AWS has built into it that I haven't really spent much time tapping into, but that's why S3 is so powerful and easy to use. So, but I'm going to go to, let's say this here, and I'm going to go down here and I'm right clicking on it. And first I'm going to say web URL. So if you go here, and actually I think this will work. Let's have some fun here. And so what's kind of cool is I'm going to go ahead and put this link in the chat window, and you should be able to put that into your browser and then bring it up in the browser, because this is public and it's available, so I haven't locked it down. And those pieces here, but you can see that every item that's put into a bucket now gets a unique URL. And notice the URL, /folder1/. So it's that URL that creates the folder structure within it. Now I'm going to go here and I'm going to get, instead of going to web URL, I'm going to go to properties, and I'm going to look at the object name. And notice the object name. It's kind of hard to see, but it's folder1 / alpha anywhere ISPNG. So the cool thing about that is that this is just whatever I want in front of that slash. And then therefore either the web console or here, when they see that before the slash, it says, oh, that's a folder, and shows it from there. So Amazon stores this whole file name, but then the user interface shows from there. And you're not limited to a single level. You could have multiple levels of folders by just appending items to that. And I'll show you how to do that in the next moment here. So, so really flexible, very simplistic, but very powerful, because you can create folders on the fly. You don't have to go create folder XYZ. You can just say, hey, append a folder 5 on front of this thing. When you send it up to there, it appends this information, and then the user interface shows it. So it's super flexible, easy. It makes your job a lot easier there. Now, let's go in and look at how I upload things too. So let me do a demonstration here. I'm going to go into my working preview, and I've created a very simple user interface here where I have my folders here, including, say, multi-level folders. And if I click folder 2 and then I select a file to upload, let's go to pictures. There we go. You'll see in a moment it's going to say, as it goes through there, done. Okay. Now I went into folder 2, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go up and I'm going to go into folder 2, and you'll see that that new picture has been uploaded into this folder. And all I really did was this, is that when I click the upload button, it uses the built-in file upload Amazon S3, and there's a special feature in here called target object name on S3. Now, if this is not enabled, whatever the name of the file is, it's just going to store it at the root of the bucket. It's just going to dump it into the bucket with that name. If I want, I can go in here and put a little piece of JavaScript that creates a file name. So you'll notice what I'm doing is saying, give me the value of my dropdown, folder 1, 2, 3, and then append it with that little / to the name of the file. And so I could hard code this if I wanted to. Let me go ahead and do that. I'm just going to go webinar folder, okay, and then put it there. So I'm going to hard code this for right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and upload that same image here. It's going to ignore this, so don't worry about that. And it's going to send it up there. It just takes a moment because I'm on a webinar, of course. There we go. So I'm going to go into my Cloudberry, go up, and I'll do a refresh and check it out. There's my new folder, and inside that folder is my file. So you can imagine this is so flexible because I could read the value of a current list. I could read the value of a grid. I could ask the person put in a folder name. It doesn't matter. All I'm doing is appending that with a / to the file name, and then Amazon does the rest and puts it up on there and takes care of it from there. So folders, buckets are single level kind of things, entities. You don't have to create a bucket for every customer. You can create one bucket and then create folders for each one of them. And then you'll be able to then organize them appropriately, be able to search by that information, do a whole lot of other things that are associated with from that standpoint. So I just wanted to expand on that. Definitely the work that Dave did is critical, and you got to check that out. It's a really great document. It really makes your life easy because you could miss a step and all of a sudden something isn't working. It goes through step by step, make sure everything's working correctly. And now you can go ahead and apply to it the folder concept, and it works really well. It's once you start using the cloud storage stuff, you don't have to worry about uptime. It's going to be handled by Amazon. You have file, archiving automatically. Versus clogging up your server, you're going to find it's going to be so much easier to do things along those lines. Plus, then, as I noticed when I sent you that URL, now whenever I want to send someone an image, I just give them a URL and they can download it. I don't have to give them access to my server or anything like that. So there's so many flexible elements. Definitely explore and have fun with Amazon S3.
Excellent. Okay, so here's an advanced question, which is, well, actually, there are two questions. The first question was, what is the cost of S3? And I think the answer is dirt cheap.
It's
compared to any other storage solution, it is unbelievably inexpensive. So it's sort of a no frills thing, but yeah.
They have different tiers. And the reality is, unless you're storing like ungodly massive amounts, there's also options to say like duplicate my S3 buckets across the world, in different spots. So there's elements, but the base cost is a few bucks. It's very, very inexpensive.
Right, and you may even be, I think sometimes you have some free tiers, or they give you some amount of credit that you can use over the course of the year, and it doesn't even add up to that. So yeah,
exactly.
That's very good. All right, so here, more advanced question, not one that we have to show, but hey, you created the buckets using Cloudberry, and I think you can also create them just in the AWS console, but could you have Alpha Anywhere create the bucket for you?
I don't know that.
I was taking a peek at that, and it looks like they have an API that lets you create buckets. So
yeah, and there's actually
going to pass that into the chat window. So you just talk to it like you would any other API. I don't think it should be an issue. You just need your
Yeah.
credentials.
And there is actually, Alpha has a whole bunch of built-in, it's called the, and let's see, let's go here. There's something, it's called the storage class. And so built into Alpha in xbasic is, okay, let's see if it's there. Let's go xbasic storage. I'd have to go find it, but I'll go xbasic storage. There's a full set of xbasic functions that allow you to interface with, and remember, we're talking S3 now, but we support Amazon S3 and Azure, and including disk storage on your local server there. So you create these storage and then, here we go, xbasic functions. So let me go ahead and grab this. Oops, let me do it right before I get yelled at. Don't click the URL, click here.
No, click the share link.
Yes, exactly.
The URL can change, the share link will always be there.
Will always be the same. But there's a set of xbasic functions here. And again, the cool thing is these xbasic functions don't really care what the underlying technology is. You can just use these functions. But for instance, you have save file, save data, get item, get list items, delete items. So think of these are just like standard file interaction, but it takes care of saying, oh, I'm going to call an API and call Amazon S3 and do it there. So these functions are very, very handy. I don't see a function for creating a bucket. It kind of already assumes there's a bucket in there.
Yeah.
But below this is a whole other set of capabilities. You may do a little more digging and find something along those lines. So right up to this time, I've only just used buckets that exist or I create manually.
Right. That's how I've done it as well, but you could use the API. So let's see what else we have here for questions. We've went over the one on primary keys. Okay, we've talked about getting data from child records and parent records.
I just need 5 minutes on
bucket.
Cool, cool.
All right, what else have we got? All right. Oh, here's one. This person has got a string that they come back from. They're doing some sort of. They're trying to make a SQL call, and their SQL statement has got carriage return line feeds in it, and it's breaking. So they discovered if they remove the carriage return line feeds, it works. So the question is, what is the function that you'd want to use in xbasic to remove those carriage return line feeds?
There you go, StreamTran. So StreamTran is one of my favorites. Basically, it's the incoming text, the text you're looking for, and this could be in quotes or it could be using the character string function to specify what it is. And then this is what it gets replaced with. So you basically just replace it with a empty or a space. But I use this all the time, and it's really fast.
Yep, it's really great. Yeah. And sometimes what you replace it with is nothing. I mean, sometimes it's just like I need to delete all of these characters out of something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, if you grab that, paste that in, that would be super.
There you go.
All right, what else have we got? Multiple arguments, covered that one. Highlight an item in a view box, covered that. When will the Alpha YouTube channel be updated? It has not been updated since January.
Man.
Totally my bad. I am so sorry. We didn't actually have a ton of content in July, but I will make sure that the few sessions that we did do are up and loaded and set here.
Yeah, people don't like that YouTube channel.
I'm going to get that set up for you. Apologize for that.
We're just helping Google make a little bit more money. We are. Spend all this time to help them out.
You're going to spend clickable, can use an A tag. We've done that one, I think that's it. But let me see if more questions have come in while I am reviewing.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to take control. Today's pre-release build, 6052-5349, 21 August 2019, 6:35 a.m. There is something very cool in this, and it's been asked for a long time. The list control now has in-place editing. That has been a major differentiator between the grid and the list control. The grid always had the ability for you to have like editing, like a drop down or a text box in the grid itself, so you didn't have to actually click and go into a detail view. The list control now supports this. This is pre-release, first version. We highly recommend that you install it in a safe manner so you can play with it. But now you have the ability to, instead of having to open up a detail view or a form view or anything like that, you can literally, as you can see this animation, you could quick and then edit data right in the list control. So that's a major improvement. It really addresses a sort of why people are continuing to use grids versus lists. And obviously lists are much more powerful from a web, on tablets, phones, etc. It's responsive, and there are some really cool stuff in here. Let me go down a little bit farther. Where is it? You can use all different types of controls. You can create your own. And there's all this detailed documentation, including things like doing validation is built into it. So you'll have
your validation, and where your error messages appear and all that. Yeah,
exactly. And you can use all the cool features. And there's one other one that I wanted to show. The other is that you can literally, which is kind of cool, is right now, and I apologize, I'm going up and down very quickly. You'll notice that this kind of showed you how to edit it, like I'm turning the controls into this. Well, when you go into edit mode, you're not limited to using the structure of the display. So that's something that's very, very cool, is that when you click on it, you could open up a whole different kind of like little editing capability that is denser, makes it easier to modify the information. And then when you close it, it goes back to the standard display here. So we're going to actually find out that the UX or the list in place editing is going to be far more flexible and allow far more cool little interfaces and really optimized for mobile, because when you click on something, you want to just immediately show like a little editing thing right there to edit the data, then say save, and then it goes back to the display format. So there's 7 videos in here. It was in today's release. It's this in-place editing. Which one was it? Freeform layouts. It's this one right here I'm mentioning. It's called in-place editing freeform layouts. What it allows you to do is that when you click to do in-place editing on the row, you can then put in your own freeform layout. It's really cool. Mind-boggling to think of all the cool things you can do with it. And this, I think, will really go a long way towards modifying and having a lot neater, simpler interfaces for people to use, and further move people from grids onto lists, which is really where all the development effort's going in. We still maintain grids, support them, fix them, do things like that, but new features and stuff are going to lists. You want to definitely start migrating your way there.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of grids, though, here's a question. I'm not sure I fully understand it, but
did you not hear what I just said? Oh wait, sorry, I'm in my teacher mode again.
No, we're still supporting. You said we're still supporting grids. I heard that half of it. I heard the half I wanted to hear.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they are still supported.
Is there a way to filter a dropdown in a grid without using a session variable? It says, for example, filtering on a field in the grid or an argument or a state variable.
I see. Yes, because what you can do is, let me see if I have an example or something close to that. Okay. Let me just go ahead and say this. Let's see if I've got something in here. Let me go to my views. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make this editable, and I will go ahead and change this from a text box to a drop-down box. Okay, so when I have my choices, I have 3 choices: static, ABC, dynamic. This is a pull from the database, or variable, and this is a variable that is created that you load yourself. So it's an xbasic variable that, say, when you open up this grid in the you can load that variable and then spit that information out. Now, a cool feature in alpha is that when you do dynamic here, you can put like things like session variables. Like if I go here, and I think this is what they're talking about. Let's go ahead and just select this. And I go in there in the select statement. I can say, you know, categories, ID, no name, and ID. I can go in here and you'll notice I can use session variables here to refresh that there. So that's one method here. So what I usually do is I take and I move to the variable and I load that variable myself. And the reason I do that is twofold. One is that on the fly, I can update that variable value. So if I wanted to change this dropdown at any time, I could run a little piece of code to update that variable, and then I can say refresh this grid and it will reload this dropdown. Now, the important thing about that, which is really critical, is the regular refresh method. So let me go to JavaScript functions, and let me go ahead and put in this method, and I'll go to refresh. Okay. So let's go to refresh here. Okay, very important. When I want to do that, I say grid refresh, but the most important thing I do is you'll notice there's two versions of it. It's refresh and refresh true. And if you say refresh on the grid, it will refresh the choices in the drop-down boxes. So this is what you can do. You can make an xbasic callback, reload your menu choices into a session variable or whatever you want it to be, either as a variable, or you could, that's the way to do this, reload the variable. So now that variable has that information, and then you can say refresh true, and what it will do is re-render the grid, and when it builds that drop-down box, it will read the current version of the variable. So you don't have the situation where once I load the grid, I'm done. No, you can do things on the fly. And I had a specific customer which would add items to a menu, so they wanted a little box next to it. It would open up a UX. They would add some items to a menu, and when that UX closed, what it would do is it would say, refresh the grid, reload those variables, and now it had the updated information in that dropdown, and that worked really, really well. But the most important thing you had to do was when you did the grid object refresh, you had to say true here, because then that forced a reload of the dropdown. If you just say refresh, it basically pulls the data from the database, puts it in, but for speed purposes, it doesn't refresh the dropdowns and other things like that, just because it takes longer to re-render the grid. So it's more of I want to do it quick or I want to do it full. So again, what you could do is when you build your fields here, your choices, you can actually use a variable here, which you can set in an on-gridalize that or a page variable. And then once you have that, reload that and then say grid refresh, and then you will see your new updated drop-down items available. Very cool kind of feature, and see it a lot in dynamic systems where people are in data entering and you don't want them to have to go all the way out, go to somewhere else, update stuff and come back in. You almost want to have them do it on the fly. This is a really good way to do that from that standpoint.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So we have two more, which I don't think we're going to be able to get to, but I'm going to sort of read them. I'm going to read them anyway, and we'll see what we can do, and we'll probably get to them next time. But first person would like to see a demo of the following. They'd like to hide a button on an entry panel, and when deleting a record, return to the list and refresh the list. So I'm presuming what they're talking about is they have a list in a panel card, and that list may have buttons for add, delete, whatever. They don't want the delete one, they want the add one. But when they are looking at the detailed view of the record, they want to have a delete button there. They want that to delete the record, return to the list, and refresh the list.
Okay. Yeah, we'll document that and do that as a little, that'd be a cool throw.
That'd be a cool little one. And then the next one is, can you show a linked grid where the linked component only has a detailed view for data entry? So I guess it means not for display, like only during data entry do you want to see it.
Well, the way I do that is do a grid with if I just want the detail view, I just do a UX to the link. But we can cover that and go over the different options you have available.
That sounds terrific. And if people who ask those want to clarify a little bit more in an email,
yeah, we would love if the more detail you give us,
the more detail the better, so we can get it as more realistic and more accurate to your particular use case. So, hey, Dion, thanks very much for presenting. Thank you, everyone, for attending, especially those of you who asked questions and helped keep our session lively. If you do have more questions, go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. Thanks very much. Take care. Hope to see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.